All right. Well, welcome everyone. Hello to everyone joining. And whether you're a longtime Freestar partner or just getting to know us, we're thrilled that you're here today. Today's session is an exclusive look at Freestar Intelligence, which is our dynamic monetization engine powered by artificial intelligence and machine learning, which we'll refer to as AI ML. And before we get started, we just have a few housekeeping notes. So first, if you have any questions along the way, just drop them in the chat and we'll be answering them throughout the talk. Second, we'll be recording this webinar and it will go straight to your inbox after the session. And then third, if you have questions that you want to talk to us later about or just continue the conversation, you can send us an email at hello@freestar.com. So AI/ML is great, but it's only as good as the heartbeat that steers it, and the real people behind it. So I'm going to introduce you to some of those people right now, our speakers today, who represent the experts of our teams behind all of this tech. The first, Michael Barnaby, he's our Senior AI/ML Product Manager. And Nick Gallardo, VP of Engineering. Hugh Barnes, VP of Data Science. Plus, we'll hear from Saad Banani, Senior Onboarding Yield Manager, and Hannah McDowell, Senior Customer Success Manager, who will walk us through how Freestar Intelligence works in the wild with actual publisher results. I'll be your moderator today, and I'm Miranda Hawkins, Product Operations Manager here at Freestar. Before we get started, I want you to take a minute, or I'm going to take a minute and set the scene. I would like you guys to take a second and bring your minds back to the 90s. The early 2000s. Maybe you weren't born yet, but if you were, go back to the 90s. Some of you might have been wearing low-rise jeans, some bucket hats. Maybe some of you were wearing fanny packs. Sadly, those are back in style today. Actually, I like the fanny packs, but the low-rise jeans, I don't know about those. But some of these things were iconic of the 90s and early 2000s. Backstreet Boys, new Nintendos. Well, ad tech during this era was minimally complex, with just a few bidders and fairly predictable results. And then, fast forward to today, it's an entirely different story. The industry is flooded with demand-side platforms, supply-side platforms, ad exchanges, identity solutions, shifting privacy regulations, not to mention the sheer amount of acronyms, which just get very annoying to deal with. But as a publisher, you're likely asking yourself some questions. Which bidders are the most effective? Do I call them pre-bid, client-side, or server-side? Amazon TAM, Google Open Bidding. One of my favorites, how do I balance user experience while still achieving revenue goals? How do I optimize price floors and auction timeouts? Which identity solutions actually drive results? So you probably understand the value of these elements, and some of you with bigger teams, like the bigger publishers that have the teams, you're probably actually already working on these things. However, my next question is, are you driving real-time customizations to your auction mechanics and ad products that are tailored to your audiences at scale with a level of granularity you couldn't dream of? Well, that's why we created Freestar Intelligence. Think of it as our proprietary decision engine. We've combined over a decade of hands-on experience, the horsepower of AI/ML, and relentless experimentation, over 25 million experiments a week, to be exact, and build a machine that removes the guesswork and limitations of manual yield management. So Freestar Intelligence dynamically adjusts auction mechanics. You can think of that as the back end, and user experience, the front end. So now that I've set the scene, let's take a look under the hood, starting with our dynamic auction mechanic solutions. And I'm going to bring it over to Nick, who's going to talk about our modular header bidding or micro wrapper.
Hey, everybody. So this is something that is rather new to us and rather new to a lot of folks within the industry. So our engineering team that is headed up by Martin Hill has worked on this micro wrapper solution for some time. And what we've seen from it is that with this approach, rather than having a lot of code on there that you may or may not need and bogging down a page with all that unnecessary code, by having the selection of which modules and which pieces of the ad stack you need, this helps dramatically lower the memory usage. We see around a 40% reduction, which is a huge win for any website. So why does this matter, really? It frees up system resources, keeps everything running smoothly, especially on mobile devices, maintains site responsiveness, and also it ensures visitors aren't stuck waiting for heavy scripts to load and unnecessary things to happen. So it really is a smoother user experience through the lower latency. That's pretty much the biggest one of the biggest ones, I would say. It's up to a half second shaved off of the time for the loading of the scripts and the ads. And that will help you compared to more traditional setups, because that half second can feel like an eternity when you're counting revenue over and over and over again. So by trimming the fat on the resource heavy tasks, users see content more quickly, and that keeps them engaged and less likely to bounce. So with this, you also have a cutting down of the resource and intensive features. So major reason why we see such strong performance gains is that we've reduced the resource heavy features by as much as 30%. So rather than a one size fits all bundle, we become selective about the code that we run, ensuring that every component serves a purpose. So the other impact of this is with the aspect when it comes to the business outcomes and making it a meaningful business outcome for you. So shorter load times, again, mean happier visitors, the bounce rate's lower, longer session durations. They don't see that the site's slowing down, bogging down, things of that nature. Plus, it's a more efficient site that leads to better ad performance and ultimately the higher revenue that's provided there as well.
Thanks, Nick. Let's shift over to our dynamic bidder configurations and timeouts. So this is another part of that backend auction mechanics powered by Freestar Intelligence. Michael, can you start us off by just what is it and why is it important?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Miranda. So hi, everybody. As Nick mentioned, one size doesn't fit all, and that's true for all impressions and all requests. Not all requests are born equal, whether that is different geos, different placements, obviously different domains, and there's different values associated with that. Different demand partners will value an impression more than others. So what our dynamic bidder configuration does is it selects running those millions of experiments you mentioned, Miranda, 25 million a week, vast scale of data at play here. We're talking billions and billions of parameters. What we're able to do is optimize the bidder selection for the bidders that will value the impression or the request more than the rest of the market. So for every impression, we select a bidder configuration which would drive the highest revenue or the most value for the publisher. So what does that mean in real terms? It means that we're active on client, we're active on server side. So we're doing all of the experiments, whether the bidder or the demand partner supports client or server. We're running concurrently. And then the results, as I mentioned, you want the bid density to be, you want the bidders in the room that value that request more than the others. So we see real uplift of between 5 to 8% across the session. So when you put that again in real terms, every session 5-8% for revenue that's already there, we can see the density and the impact that it has for the configurations. What's also tied into that, Nick mentioned speed. Timeouts have a role to play in this. And for that, the more granular you can make those decisions, the better the outcome is. So if a user is on a fast network speed, you might want to run a faster auction, a tighter auction than if If a user was in a location where speed was less optimal, you can maybe run a more lenient timeout. So those configurations tied with timeouts to an optimized revenue, and i.e. the highest value CPM for that.
And Nick, can you tell us the difference between client server side and Freestar's approach to that?
As far as the client, say the question one more time, sorry.
Can you tell us the difference between client side and server side?
Oh yeah, so with the introduction of pre-bid, obviously that's pre-bid.js is code that runs on a publisher's page. And pre-bid.js is primarily going to route your request to on the client side. So straight from the publisher's page or the site, straight to the demand partners on the other end. Now, from the other side of that, we have a pre-bid server instances set up, and those pre-bid server calls can be made from the client to pre-bid server, and it's just one call. And there we have multiple bidders that can be called via server side. So you could have one call and connection to dozens of different demand sources, all bringing the bids back in one response, rather than having a bunch of different calls from the client side. So a couple different ways of making these requests.
I know there are some stats we were going to share, so give me 1 second. All right, Michael, did you want to speak to some of these, just the results from turning on the dynamic bidder configurations and timeouts?
Yeah, absolutely. We can see that in the nice purple. We see between 5 and 8% revenue uplift for publishers when they are running those dynamic bidder configurations. We see that across the network for all publishers. We're seeing the results ultimately be positive when you take the configuration that could be in play versus a manual configuration. Maybe an ad operations user can set 10, 20, 30 configurations, but the scale that the dynamic bidder configuration happens, the benchmark, we're talking hundreds, and again, in real time.
And another buzzword right now is sustainability. Nick, you've worked on traffic shaping. Can you talk a little bit about this and how we're approaching supply path optimization?
Yeah, so with all of our inventory, when we're talking specifically about server-side inventory, one of the aspects that we have to think about with server-side is that it does have a cost. All requests on some level, regardless of client or server, they're all going to have a cost, both to the user experience, making never request out, but from a server side aspect, it's a literal cost to send these requests out. We're paying a fee every time one happens. And when we look at some sort of sustainability aspects to this, we take a look at, okay, we have a request coming from a site and maybe a geo that doesn't perform well with a certain bidder. And having that bid go out in some cases might not make much sense. So what we do is we have, we worked with our data science team on this, and we have some algorithms that run, and we regularly update these, and we take a look at what is worth sending out in this environment on the server. And when we do that, we actually filter out unnecessary requests. So kind of like the theme that we've been talking about here is not having that extra, those unnecessary things. And by having only the necessary requests go out, that lowers the the bandwidth of sending these things out. It makes it more sustainable. It definitely ensures that we have the right mix of demand partner and all the different combinations of things, of the device type, the geo. We take into account all of these different variables that shift consistently, and we're making sure that we have the most optimal way to bring bids back while ensuring that we are providing the highest value for the publisher to continue to have some really great revenue. And what this allows us to do is to basically filter out the unnecessary things and only provide what is necessary. And we continually run tests to make sure that we have the right mix, because we understand seasonality, we understand buyer trends from agencies and bidders. We understand all these things are consistently variable on the other side as well, from the demand side, from spending. And so we always do test, and we always do send what we deem at this moment might not be the right combination of a device type and a browser, and that sending that in might not make sense this moment, but we will send those to test out, those requests out to some of those bidders in certain cases, and do sample sizes. And if we do see that the value is there, we then increase that threshold and increase it more and more. And we continually test and shape this traffic on different variables to ensure that we have the best outcome possible.
Thanks for that, Nick. Let's transition to dynamic floor pricing now. Hugh, you haven't talked in a little bit. Let's hear from you, the data man. Tell us what is floor pricing? I mean, I think most people understand the general concept, but what's going on? How does it work? And why is dynamic floor pricing a good solution?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Miranda. So I'll just spend a minute giving you my thoughts on why I think floor prices are important. So floor prices are not a feature of all auctions. So floor prices are really important in auctions where the market trading is quite thin. So I used to trade in financial markets, and one of the things I used to trade is gold. And I had a look at the price of gold this morning, and it was $3,095 an ounce. And in a market like that, you've got a huge number of buyers and you've got a huge number of sellers, and they're all trading at the same time. And we would call that a very deep market. Now, I would be really, really confident as a gold trader that if I went into the market and I wanted to sell or I wanted to buy, I would get at a fair price, because the markets are really deep, because there's lots of people interacting at the same time. And so in those markets, we don't need floor prices. The marketplace itself is very, very efficient at establishing the fair price for a particular commodity. Now, the other end is, let's say, fine art. In fine art, we're selling one-offs. It may be that a particular buyer in one particular month who might pay a lot for it, they're just not around at the moment. Maybe they're on holiday, whatever. So markets like that, we call them very thin. It's very dependent upon who happens to be wanting to buy or sell on the particular day. And in those types of situations, it's quite possible that the market isn't able to establish a fair price. And so as a seller, you need to be really, really careful to protect yourself against the eventuality that the market doesn't price your commodity fairly. And that's what floor prices do. And in ad tech, we know that they're really important. So what happens? Let's imagine the situation. You've been working in ad tech. You're a publisher. You've been putting your ads out there, and you haven't been operating with the floor price. And suddenly you start to introduce a floor price into the mix. Well, the first thing that happens is that your fill rate drops. Now, that's not something that you want. That reduces your revenue. But a short time after that, what you will notice is that because you've got the floor price there, the market starts to understand that your inventory is worth more. Your floor price is sending a strong message to the market about what your inventory is worth. And so the CPMs start to come up, and your revenue will rise. Now, if you push too hard, and I'll come on to flooring price pressure, which is a proprietary term that we use. If you push too hard, then your fill rate will really start to drop significantly, and your overall revenue will drop. So what you want to do is you want to have the right level of the right floor prices, so your CPMs come up, but not so high that they reduce your overall revenue by pushing fill rate down. And that's a tricky thing to do. It's a tricky thing to do if you're managing one or two ad unit types. But over a period of time, if you're doing it manually and you've got lots of experience, then you could probably do an okay job. But unless you're watching it every day, then you're not going to be able to respond dynamically. And that's where Freestar Intelligence comes in. So our intelligent algorithms are good for two reasons. Firstly, they're able to constantly monitoring the market dynamics. They're looking at supply and demand, and they're responding to these changes very quickly. So as campaigns start, as campaigns end, as the time of day is obviously constantly changing, and that's changing the dynamics out there, and floor prices need to respond. So changes over time is one key thing, and the other thing is that ad units are very different. Floor prices only work if you're giving a consistent message to the market about what your inventory is worth. So when you're you need to have consistent prices across ad units that are similar, but ad units that are different, obviously they're worth a different amount. So you have to have a different price for all those different things. And our system is able to understand that, and the dynamics match that. So
I'm going to jump in 1 second, Hugh. So we got a question, and it's a good one. And just to break it up a bit, so it's Cigar, good to see you, by the way. He had a question of like all of these things that we're talking about. Did the publisher have to do anything to enable it, or do we do it on the back end? And that's one of the beauties of Freestar Intelligence is we do all of it on the back end. Nothing's required from the publisher, and we can follow up with you more on what that looks like if you have specific questions around that. But yes, it is in place, and your customer success manager can follow up with you.
Can I take 1 more minute, Miranda? Is that okay?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, right. So our flooring algorithm, it targets maximizing CPMA. So that's the thing we're trying to do. Miranda just mentioned earlier 25 million experiments a week. A lot of those experiments are about flooring. Some of the other experiments are about bidder selection, etc. But that's what that's all about. It's looking for that floor price that maximizes the CPMA within those individual ad units. Now, I also mentioned earlier floor pricing pressure. So I talked about how the floor price ensures that we get a fair value for our inventory, and essentially we're making sure that the price doesn't go down too much. And we have a proprietary way of measuring that. We call that flooring price pressure. So some of those experiments are set aside for measuring that. So we're targeting the maximization of CPMA, but we're also monitoring this thing we call flooring price pressure. And again, that's something that's happening dynamically, and we know what a healthy flooring price pressure looks like. We know when we're pushing a little bit too hard, we need to reduce the floors. We know when we could be doing more. We're actively managing all those things. And we have some results on the screen there. I might pass over to Mike so you can listen to somebody else's voice for a minute to go through the results there.
You're too kind, Hugh. One case studies that we've got a study slide pending as well, but we see an increase in CPM of 21% in this example versus a manual baseline. And when we think about Google optimized, it's a tool that is better than a manual strategy. But we know that within the realms of the black box, which is the Google optimized there, that our flooring outperforms that with another 7% lift there. So very strong on the case studies and the metrics, and it ties back into that pricing pressure, continually monitoring and measuring, and the full life cycle that we have, which, again, if you go back from the start of the deck around the module header bidder, the dynamic supply and demand there, and then flooring, how we control some of that. But the results are very, very clear there. And I'll hand over to Miranda for the actual case study on what we've heard so far.
Yeah, so we're going to bring on Hannah, Senior Customer Success Manager. And I might be biased because I used to be on the customer success team, but we have an absolutely incredible team who work hand in hand with publishers to make sure they're being empowered with all of these solutions and that everything's custom to their setup and their individual needs. Hannah's going to share a bit about actual real live results from these solutions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hannah. I'm the Customer Success Manager for 270 to Win, who has trusted Freestar as a partner for the past 7 years. As support of his team, we're always looking for ways to optimize his setup, address seasonal trends, and more. Today, I wanted to share with you the positive results of our recent dynamic flooring and bidder configuration tech. As you can see on the screen, dynamic flooring CPM year to date has increased about 32%, which equates to just under $9,000. And then CPM month to date has increased 21%, which is around $2,300. And then the dynamic ad stack RPS year to date has increased about 4%, which is about $1,500. And then RPS month to date increased about 3.8%, which is $462. So you can see there's great success there. We love how AI and ML optimizes in the background without the publisher, Alan, having to do any work. We just let our tech run and do the work that's not possible for humans to do, making Alan's life much easier, putting more money in his pocket, and all without sacrificing UX, performance, and long-term cycles.
Thanks, Hannah. Okay, we're going to transition into the last part of the back-end auction mechanics from Freestar Intelligence, and that's identity testing. What a fun subject and very, very convoluted one. So no one better to give it to you than Nick. Over to you.
I don't know if it's fun. It is very convoluted, and I might just add some more thoughts to what you have all heard in the past few years and kind of our approach to how we handle identity. So news alert, I think everyone knows, like Google Chrome, eventually third-party cookies going away, the date keeps shifting. But that nonetheless doesn't mean that we already have this issue as a publisher and as a group of publishers and companies that work with publishers. We're seeing this issue already with Safari and other environments as well. So cookies are pretty much gone. Obviously, Chrome has the largest share of users, and so we still are able to use them. But nonetheless, it already has. We have the need and we need to provide a solution for identity because we need to address those areas that are already missing outside of Chrome. And without a solid identity strategy in place, you as a publisher, you're risking leaving a significant chunk of revenue on the table. So let's see how we kind of stay ahead of the game and how we test our partners that we use identity with. So the main thing that we do is we have what I like to call sort of an elastic system. We're able to add different identity partners in whenever we want, whenever it makes business sense. So we're able to test different identity solutions and partners at relative ease because of the way that we've made this scalable and be able to, it's almost like a Lego set. We could add and subtract partners, and we built what we call ITF around that. And what ITF is basically an identity testing framework that allows us to measure the success of identity partners, looking at different sort of, again, variables of geo, device type, browser type, and we're able to see what identity providers provide the highest amount of lift. We're always running A/B tests continually, just built into the system. We have our test group and control groups, and we're able to measure the yield, the increase in gross revenue, the increase in eCPM, what it means for revenue per session. And by doing this, we're able to continually experiment and having it run side by side with all the different identity providers and tracking that revenue. And so you can see the results on the bottom here. Publishers using this framework have seen a 25 to 50% performance boost on cookieless browsers and 3 to 5% increase in Chrome. And so these are real world numbers. They're real revenue generating numbers. And by having this solution, we're able, again, to continually experiment, continually add or subtract different partners in different situations, and providing the best possible outcome for our publishers.
Can you talk about the fact that we're agnostic too? Like, we don't have a reason to have an affinity towards anyone in particular unless it's producing results.
Yeah, I think this goes throughout kind of all of the tools that we use and all the different partners that we use, to be quite honest, is we're very agnostic to the fact that we want what is best for each individual publishers. There's no favoritism. There's no ways that we, especially with identity, look at these things and say, we always will have identity partner A because they will be the best solution no matter what. We believe in data, and we look at that data, we let the data tell the story, and we're open to it changing, right? So by having different identity partners at different times and testing it, we could, say, okay, this one's better in these situations and this one's better in that situation. So it allows us to be very agnostic to approach on any of these solutions. And I think that, just looking at the numbers tells a story.
Patrick had a great question. What is considered a cookieless browser, and what percentage of traffic is cookieless these days?
Yeah, so definitely, if you're like, we could just pull the household brand names. That is going to be Chrome, which is going to have a cookie environment, and then let's just say Safari. Chrome, I'd have to look at the latest statistics, but Chrome desktop is going to have a higher percentage around. I wish I looked this up. Put me on the spot there, Patrick. But Chrome and desktop, I think, had about a 60% to 70% share of voice. And then you have Safari desktop, that's going to be your second, which then we look at mobile devices, and you're going to have in the US particularly a pretty high skew towards Safari being a dominant player, and then Chrome obviously as well. So I believe still with and Hugh, I don't know if Hugh or Michael, you've looked at this data, so jump on it and let me know if you have, but recently I've not looked at it. But on mobile, for sure, with Chrome kind of globally, it has the lion's share. In US, I do believe that it is iOS with Apple phones is going to be the most used device and browser combination. But I could be wrong.
I can jump in there thanks to a really quick Google search. So this is the actual number, but Chrome internet browsers has around 65 to 70% of market share. Safari comes in second with 15 to 20%. And then you have the other browsers that take up about 5 to 10%. Microsoft Edge and Firefox take up 5 to 10%. And then you have like the others 2 to 3%. Mobile browser market share is around 60 to 65%. So you were pretty spot on there, Nick. All right. Thanks, Patrick, for that one. we are going to go ahead and transition to our last section, which is, let's see, I want to make sure no other questions came in. We're good there. So our last section, we've covered the different back-end solutions powered by Freestar Intelligence, but we can't forget about the front end, like on-page experience. What do the actual ads look like for the users they're impacting? So whether it's showcasing multiple ads within a single ad placement, inserting the ideal video player for that user, displaying high impact, high engaging formats, customizing a desktop versus a mobile experience, our dynamic ad products allow you basically to do more with less, which is always ideal for publishers. So Michael, can you speak to our latest development, intelligent ad insertion?
Yeah, sure can. And, I'm fortunate enough to work with Hugh and his team on the data science side, and then the engineering team that builds the ML infrastructure to answer that exact question. We hypothesize a lot around what can we do? Is less more or is more more? And intelligent ad insertion allows us to answer that less can be more. When you think about the user dynamics, the user experience, the session length and the session duration that we measure a lot of our revenue benchmarks against, it's not a case of having more ads. It's a case of having the ads placed in the right locations for viewability, so the high impact. We know the users engage with scroll depth, for example. So intelligent ad insertion is our answer to less is actually more. So here we're able to balance in content placements with the dynamic nature of adding a high impact ad format, whether that is our recently launched flying carpet format or soon to be integrated with video. We can determine which format will drive the revenue across the session without having a user churn or bounce or leave the page because of their experience. So we're very mindful here where we have certain insertions based on user engagement. So with the intelligent ad insertion that was launched just in Q1. So if anyone, a quick call out, I guess, a quick plug for any partner on there. Sugar, this should already be enabled, but if it isn't, please talk to your account manager. We're seeing the adoption and we're seeing the revenue and the metrics and performance across that session drive upwards, which we're very comfortable and confident about. So this really ties into the user. What's the user experience and how do we have the revenue across or as high as it can be? And I think, as I just mentioned the last time I was speaking, when you manage supply, as in intelligently here with the high impact, we're measuring we have the ability to dynamically select the demand partners that would value that supply. And then we can floor accordingly with the density that auction would bring. This frames the user in the center of that then. So the user and the user experience is in there. If there's an ID present, it would be worth more than if there wasn't an ID present, for example. So that's the intelligent products as they come together and they come to fruition with that user experience. And we see that with intelligent ad insertion here. The revenue numbers, we can see a 5% uplift. I'm excited to hear what Sad's going to talk about next with regards to onboarding and share of voice. So I won't steal any of his thunder. But for anyone out there that wants to hear more about IAI, please reach out in the comments. I'd love to dive a little bit deeper into this. But Miranda, over to you, because for the share of voice, or if you've got any questions.
Thanks, Michael. Sad, we're going to bring you to stage here, and he's going to share a case study. He's with the onboarding team. So publisher came in. This is just a recent product we've set live. So put this product live on their site, and he's going to talk about the results there.
Thanks, Miranda. And hi, everyone. My name is Saad Banani. I'm a senior yield manager on the onboarding team here at Freestar. And today I just really wanted to quickly go over this case study on intelligent ad insertion, as we like to call it, IAI. A couple charts here, but as Miranda said, this is a recently launched publisher, more specifically in the family vertical. The top left, what you can see is the net revenue charted against the page views. So you can get a visual of the daily revenue this product has been bringing in. And on the top right is that product share of voice that Michael was talking about. You can see that green section of the pie chart, a little over 50% product allocation from IAI. So over 50% of the revenue since going live for this publisher is from this one specific product. And I think the chart that does a really good job of highlighting where the value comes from is here on the bottom left, these bar charts, or these bar graphs. That green bar represents the flying carpet high impact format CPMs in comparison to the black bars, which are just the standard in content display CPMs. On this particular publisher, we saw a 30% increase in CPMs just because of those flying carpet high impact CPMs. So that's great to see, and that's where a lot of the value really comes in from. And then on the bottom right, just some high level numbers of what this product has generated in that 10-day span that we have the data here for. And to put everything into context, when this publisher was coming in through onboarding and we were doing forecasting, we were expecting anywhere from 30 to 40K in monthly net revenue. And taking a look at the numbers today, we've blown past that almost by double. And I'm really confident that IAI is a big contributor to that, and really excited to see this product grow and evolve here in the future.
Thanks, Dad. I think he really hit on a point too. This is kind of just the beginning of this product. There's going to be more that we add to, more that we discover through this ongoing experimentation and leveraging AI ML. So lots more to come here. All right, we had another question come in from Patrick. And by the way, that's concluded all the elements of Freestar Intelligence. So if you have any questions, now's the time to put them in the chat before we end our session today. Patrick asked, is there any transparency on what signals the bidders themselves are using to bias the optimization process?
So as far as the like ITF, looking at this, like, so is there transparency in what signals the bidders themselves are using?
Here's his follow-up question.
Oh,
this helps.
The bidder is particularly interested in an audience subset based on identity. How would you be able to optimize that? Yeah, so we are not looking right now at like the subsets based off of anything. Well, let me try to state my response here. So if they're looking for a particular audience, we are not at this point with our ITF solution looking at audience subsets and identity. That's kind of the next phase that we're certainly considering. So we currently are looking at which identity partners are active when and where, and measuring that data. So with audiences and different things of that nature, or even like taxonomy, we are not currently doing any measurements there, but it is something that we would consider in the future.
Yeah, Nick, I'll just add on the dynamic flooring and the bidder configurations, that parameters that include ID present, true, false, for example, that is one of the parameters that's in there. So maybe again, a bidder would value cookieless traffic more than another bidder. So like it may not be a specific audience like auto intenders around the IAB taxonomy, but very much these signals are part of the overarching parameters. When I talk about billions of parameters, identity as a whole is one of those verticals within that.
Great, thank you. Habib, good to see you. Good to hear from you. If we have any other questions that come in, this is your last chance. Well, not your last chance. You can email us at hello@freestar.com, and we can help you with any other questions or if you want to learn more. But hi, David. But any questions, please throw them in here, and I'll go ahead and wrap us up. So thank you for joining, first of all. Hopefully you've walked away with some valuable insights. Maybe it's left you with some more questions. That's good. Ad tech is confusing, so that means we've sparked some interest there. But this is just a glimpse of how we're harnessing the power of technology, a glimpse into our people and what they're doing to bring on more dynamic monetization strategies. At the end of the day, we're doing all of this to make your lives a little less complex, letting you do what you do best, which is creating great content, not getting lost in all the acronyms and technologies out there. So as a quick reminder, today will be recorded. We'll send that to you if you want to rewatch it or send it to your team. Follow-up questions can come to hello@freestar.com. And then lastly, if you're interested in becoming a Freestar partner, you can head to our website and fill out the contact form, and our amazing sales reps will be in touch with you. I'm going to check the chat one more time from questions. Jimmy, do we need to do anything from our side? Nope, this is handled all in the back end. This technology, that's part of the beauty of it, as we stated earlier, is we enable this in the back end. One less thing publishers have to do. And that's all the questions for now. So we might hear from you via email, but thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time.